So I want to just start by taking a moment to recap what we've done and where we are. So if you're taking notes, you don't necessarily have to write any of this down. This is just to kind of reframe what we've done so far and where we're at. Because it's been a while, right? We've been working on quadratics for quite a few days now. I just want to kind of recap what we've talked about so far. So we've talked about graphing, and we talked about there were three different forms that we might have in order to do that graphing. And then we talked about converting between those three different forms. So to go from vertex to standard form, we expanded. To go from standard form to intercept, we factor. To go from intercept back to standard, we FOILed. And then to go from vertex form, or from standard form to vertex form, we used completing the square. So we've spent some days here. Hi, welcome. Talking about each of these separate little skills on their own. And this is one use for them, right? Is we can use these little skills to kind of move back and forth between these different forms for a quadratic. There's some other places, though, that we can use these skills. Specifically solving a quadratic. And that's really what I want to kind of talk about today. And eventually we can use solving to find points or find specific values in a graphing context. So this stuff all interconnects together a little bit. I just wanted to take a minute and kind of give us a visual picture of what we've done so far and how these different things are related to one another and how we can use them kind of going forward and how it's going to kind of all link back together. Okay? Okay. So today we want to start talking about solving, and we'll spend several days talking about solving because there's several different techniques that I can use to solve. And some of these techniques are easy, but maybe don't work every single time. Some of them are a little bit more detailed and work every single time. Sometimes you could use more than one technique and still have everything work out nicely. So there's going to be a little bit of figuring out which one of these solving techniques I want to use in a given situation. But today we're only going to talk about one solving technique. And the one solving technique we want to talk about today is solving by factoring. So if I want to solve a quadratic equation by factoring, we're going to be using this key idea. I know that if I have two things multiplied together that equal 0, that at least one of those two things equals 0. So what are we really saying there? That if I have x times y equals 0, that implies that x equals 0 and or y equals 0, right? Does this work if x times y is equal to some other number. What if x times y equals 1? Can I say the same thing here? Not really, right? X could be 1 and y could be 1, or x could be negative 1 and y could be negative 1, or x could be 2 and y could be a half, and this goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on forever. So there is something very special about that these two things have to multiply to equal 0. This we give a name to. We call this the zero product property. And I abbreviate that often as ZPP because we talk about it a fair bit. What the zero product property says, if you have two things that are multiplied together and they equal 0, one or both of those two things are equal to 0. Okay? So we're going to take advantage of the zero product property and turn solving a quadratic equation problem into solving a linear equation problem. So let's run through the procedure of what we need to do then. So the first thing we need to do is make sure our equation is equal to 0. So to do that, we'll just add or subtract things from both sides, so we move everything onto one side. Everybody okay with that idea of what making it equal 0, making the equation equal 0 would entail? Okay. Step 2, factor. We've talked about how to do that. So we'll continue to get some more practice factoring because we need to do factoring to do these solving problems. And then we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. It's this step where we're using the zero product property. Okay, so that's it. Let's do some examples here, okay? Let's say we have x squared minus 8x equals 9. What should I do first here? Subtract 9 from both sides because I need my equation to equal 0. Right now it's equal to 9. That's not going to cut it. Okay. So now my equation is equal to 0. We're done with step 1. The next step is to factor it. Great. This one you should be able to factor using the shortcut because the leading coefficient is 1. This is one where you should be able to factor this in your head at this point. So to factor this, we're looking for the two numbers that multiply to give me negative 9, and then add to give me negative 8. What are those two numbers? Close. Negative 9 and positive 1, right? So now we've done with step 2. We've got it factored. Our final step then is I'm going to take each of these two factors and set them equal to 0 and solve each of them separately. Which is easy to do, right? These are just little linear equations. We should be good at solving those. It sounded like when we talked about the Algebra 1 skills we remembered, that this was the skill that most of us remembered spending a lot of time in Algebra 1 doing, right? Just solving these little linear equations. So that's it. This has two answers. The answers are 9 and negative 1. Everybody okay with this idea? So it doesn't get harder than this. What's the hardest step most likely going to be? Doing the factoring. right? But once it's factored, it's really, really easy because it's just an Algebra 1 problem. Does that feel okay, guys? Okay, so let's stop here. That's all I wanted to